day.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilman Hess.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this is an awful way to start the year for the town, but it'll get better because the mayor will be back. So for the time being, you're stuck with me. I hope he gets here quickly so you girls can do your thing. Either that or maybe it's time for us to really vote on some stuff tonight. But we can't. Yeah, right. First thing we need to address is the minutes from December 4th and also December 9th, regular meetings. Are there any questions, corrections, or what have you?
On the unfinished business section of the second page of the 120913.
Well,
I didn't know if this was a mistake or not. Borough of Littlestown is B-U-R-R-O-W.
It's taken care of.
Borough is O-U-B-H.
It's taken care of.
Taken care of? Good.
okay. Good enough. Anything else? Okay. We will approve those Monday evening. Now, we have a reception of a delegation here, an important one, as a matter of fact. Henry, you wish to, well, who would like to introduce these girls?
Well,
Properly.
okay, I'm sorry. And there's hardly any introductions are necessary.
I know.
Because Vapor and McKinley has been coming with us for several years now. Michelle is our lead auditor for our account. And she's here tonight to basically present the findings of the 2013 audit. So, we'll turn it over to
Great.
Thank you for having us tonight. I am Michelle Mills, and I'm here from Gimlet, and this is my colleague, Teresa Augustine, and she was the senior accountant who worked closely with me during this year's financial audit. We are here to present the draft report for fiscal year 2013. I believe you should have a copy of the audit report. What I intended to do was do a PowerPoint so you can choose to either follow along on the PowerPoint or you can look directly at the audit report itself.
It's getting annoying.
We're going to bring a microphone over.
Oh, jeez.
Here. Well, yes, but doesn't pick it up on this, I guess.
Henry, why don't you switch so she can...
Okay. Then you're going to have to switch as well. Aren't you going to be doing something? I should have thought about this earlier.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sound check.
Sound check? Sound good? Yep. Okay. We're going to be reviewing the financial statement audit. I would like to point out that this year the city was not subject to the single audit. As you may recall that in previous years, you were subject to the single audit because you had federal grant expenditures in excess of $500,000. And for fiscal year 2013, your federal grant expenditures were less, so you were not subject to the single audit. I always like to remind everyone of the responsibilities, and again, the financial statements are the responsibility of management. We, as the auditors, are responsible for issuing an opinion on those financial statements and also to plan and perform the audit to make certain that there is no material misstatements to the financial statements. The audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards, and the city did receive an unqualified opinion. Now, if you're following along in the audit report, I would like you guys just to pause for a minute on page 1 And page 1 says the report of the independent certified public accountants on financial statements. And the only thing I'd like to point out here is when you look at this report, it looks a little different than in prior years. The content of the letter is the same. Under the clarity standards that are now effective for accounting standards, you'll see that we've added these subtitles where it talks about management's responsibility, the auditor's responsibility, and again, highlights where the opinion is being stated, again, for clarity. So I just kind of tell you that when you're looking at it, the content isn't different, it's just the format looks a little different. All right, as you'll, okay, the next item of just is to remind you that in addition to the financial statements, management is to provide us with the management's discussion and analysis, and you'll see in your draft report that is in the process of being prepared right now, and we hope to have that by Monday night's meeting. So at this point, we're working on it. You may remember in previous presentations that GASB requires that we present two sets of financial statements, one that is from a government-wide perspective and one that is at the fund level, and the page numbers there reference where within the audit report you'll see the two separate reports. So to focus on a few of the financial highlights, again, if you want to go to page 9 of the audit report, you'll see about halfway down the page, there is a total that says total assets, and for the city as of fiscal year 2013, your total assets were $35.3 million, and that was a 4% decrease from the prior year. And we report your assets by business type activities and governmental activities, and you'll see that the 2/3 of your assets are for business type activities, which is water and sewer, and then the rest is your governmental activities. Governmental activities were just over $12 million, and our business type activities were $23.2 million. On that same page, about 3/4 of the way down, you'll see the total for liabilities. The city's total liabilities at the end of fiscal year 2013 were just over $17.4 million, and that was a 2% decrease from the prior year. You'll see that the majority of the liabilities are in business type activities, and that's $15.1 million, and the governmental activities is just over $2.3 million. The difference between your assets and your liabilities is something called net position. So for fiscal year 2013, our total net position was just over $17.8 million. Pretty even, 55% for governmental activities and 45% for business type activities. The second required government-wide financial statement is on page 10, and that is the statement of activities. And again, I'm not sure how many of you are following in the audit report or if you find it more useful to look at the slide. I think this statement is a little difficult to follow, and that's why you might want to follow the slide. It starts with the expenses for the city in the very far left column, and you'll see that the total governmental activity expenses were just over $3.5 million. And then we have program revenues as well as general revenues. And so our program revenues encompass charges for services, operating grants and contributions, capital grants and contributions. Our charges for services as it pertained to governmental activities was $174,000. Our operating grants and contributions were just over $116,000. We had a small amount that was capital grants and contributions of just over $18,000. Our general revenues, which encompasses property taxes, income taxes, county tax equity, is the bulk of your revenues for governmental activities, and that was just under $3 million. If we look at the statement of activities for the business type activities, you're going to see that our total expenses for business type activities is $3.2 million. We had $2.1 million from charges for services and $175,000 from general revenues. The difference between the revenue and the expenses is called change in net position. So for the city, for fiscal year 2013, the change in net position was just over a negative 1.1 million. 222,000 was for governmental activities, and 885,000 was for business-type activities. And you'll note that this is a decrease in net position. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec. So I'm going to pause here for a second, because when we look at the government-wide perspective, again, the focus is that of like a commercial business. We are capitalizing our fixed assets, we're recording depreciation expense, and we're recording all of our long-term debt obligations on the statement of net position. So when you look at those numbers and you say, wow, how did we get a change in net position of a negative number of $1 million, quite a bit of it is depreciation expense. And as you look back over the last several years and the number of projects that have been completed and assets that have been placed in service, you have significant depreciation expense currently. You saw I think I'm correct here, I might be jumping ahead a little bit, over a $300,000 increase in your depreciation expense in the utility fund year over year, based on the capital projects that were completed during fiscal year 2013. So that's pretty substantial. And we can go over some more information a little bit further in the slides, but that was kind of a quick snapshot. Then we're required to also report at a fund level. And again, the focus at the fund level is very different than the focus from the government-wide perspective. We don't have capital assets on the books, and we don't have any long-term debt obligations, so the numbers are much smaller. Our total assets for the governmental activities was just over 5.8 million. Our liabilities were significantly less at 207,000. The difference between the assets and the liabilities from a fund level perspective is called fund balance. Our fund balance was just over 5.6 million. So this slide is showing that we had, for our general fund, just under $3.3 million of revenues, and this is on page 12 of the audit report. And we had total expenses of just under 3.2. So we had an excess of revenues over expenses, and you see a positive number here. Again, from a fund level perspective, we have a positive number. Then we have to account for all the things that we have to do to convert to the government-wide presentation, and you see some very significant numbers. We see depreciation expense of $488,000. We have debt service expenses of $61,000. Our capital outlay was just over $73,000. And the combination of those several items there takes us from a fund level perspective of a positive 165 to the change in net position that I referred to of a negative 221 for the governmental activities. This slide does the same thing. We're looking at from a fund balance perspective to net position. And so when we spoke about the fund level financial statements don't account for capital assets or long-term debt, that's how we get from 5.6 million as reported on page 11 to 9.7 million as reported on page 9. And you can see that there are significant capital assets for governmental activities of under 6.3 million. And we also have, $1.9 million of long-term debt obligations. So this slide gives you a little perspective from how do we compare to last year. So when we're looking at the general fund and we're looking at our revenues, you'll see how we played out. So our property taxes for fiscal year 2013 compared to 2012, I'm having a hard time reading the numbers. Let me flip up to my slide. Our property taxes essentially were about the same. Our income taxes essentially were about the same. We saw a slight increase in our license and permits. We saw a drop in our intergovernmental revenues. Our service charges went up slightly, and we also saw again, the rest of the stuff, other miscellaneous, was roughly about the same. From the expense side, you can take a look and say, okay, for the general fund, our largest expenses were related to debt service, followed by I'm sorry, that's not true. I'm looking at the wrong column. For fiscal year 2013, public safety had the largest expenditures at just under $1.3 million, followed by public works at $884,000. So you can see that there were some significant fluctuations in our expenditure activity from fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 13. The next slide has us looking at the utility fund, and you'll see that our operating revenues, there was actually an 11% increase in the utility fund operating revenues. Our operating expenses saw a significant increase, and when we look at whether or not we had operating income or loss, for fiscal year 2012, we actually did have operating income of about $77,000, compared to fiscal year 2013, where we had an operating loss of about $496,000. A big piece of this is related to the increase in depreciation expense. Let's just pause for a moment. Does anyone have any questions, just generally? So these last several slides just gave you a quick snapshot of what's in the draft audit report in the financial statement section. Accompanying the financial statements are a number of required note disclosures, and I'm not going to go through them tonight, but I would encourage each of you to read the note disclosures. They have a lot of very good information in them. We have met with management, and they have reviewed them, and again, I just think it's very important to spend a few minutes to look at the note disclosures. The next item is on page 34 to 38 of the audit report, and this is what we call the required supplemental information, also RSI. In our original budget for the general fund, you can see that we were just over $3.1 million. We didn't have any modifications, so the final budget is the same. Our actual revenues came in at $3.2 million, creating a positive variance of $175,000. You'll see in the expense line, we had budgeted just over $3.1 million. We had some minor budget adjustments to get to the final budget of just over, I'll just say $3.2 million. Our actual expenses came in a little bit less than that, so we also had a positive variance of $45,000. So if you take the two numbers together, we had a positive variance of $220,000 from where we expected to be. Questions, comments? I mentioned earlier that the audit was performed in accordance with government auditing standards, and as a requirement of that, we are to look at the internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. And we are required to communicate in writing to you anything that we deem to be a material weakness or a significant deficiency in internal control. On this slide is the definition of a material weakness, and I'm just going to read it. A material weakness is a deficiency or combination of deficiencies in internal control such that there is a reasonable possibility that a material misstatement will not be prevented or detected and corrected on a timely basis. And those are the buzzwords: prevented or detected and corrected. So you might have one, but as long as your internal control system found it and fixed it, then that means your internal control system is working. We did identify a material weakness in fiscal year 2013's audit, and that's finding 13-01, capital asset accounting and reporting. And I think it might be easier for you all just to go to the actual audit report, and that would be on page 41. As many of you know, the city has numerous ongoing construction projects which have multiple funding sources, including grants, loans, and bonds. The costs incurred are reflected in the city's accounting system. However, the city was not able to easily ascertain the amount of any unspent bond funds and/or whether all restricted funds had been spent as of June 30. In addition, the departments overseeing the construction projects and the finance department did not communicate with one another regarding the status of the projects. a substantial project had not been identified as completed prior to the start of the audit. So that was the condition. That's the item that we found that we feel is significant and is a material weakness in the internal control system. Management is responsible for implementing an effective control environment and ensuring that transactions are properly recorded in the city's accounting records. In addition, amounts restricted for specific purposes must be separately tracked and accounted for in the accounting records. The cause for this, we believe that the city did not have an effective system in place to track funding sources and monies that had been spent on construction projects, nor is there an effective system in place to determine which projects have been completed. And I don't think any of you will be surprised. I think this has been an ongoing discussion. In the current year, the audit was delayed due to management having difficulty determining unspent funds on ongoing and completed projects, as well as the amount of restricted cash in the utility fund as of June 30. A material adjustment was proposed to reflect a completed project as of June 30, 2013, that had not been identified as such in the accounting records. Our recommendation is that you adopt a more effective system for tracking funding sources for capital projects and for determining which projects have been completed. And we have been working with Bobby Jo since she came, and she's done a fabulous job picking up the pieces, and I would like to compliment her and Henry for their extra efforts. We are still working through some pieces, but it has not been an easy challenge. The second item is less severe than a material weakness. We're required to talk about anything that we think is a significant deficiency. And again, it says that it's important enough to merit attention by those charged with governance. That's why we're sharing it with you. And this item had to deal with journal entries, and that starts on page 42. In our testing, we noted several journal entries did not have sufficient support. We were not able to ascertain the reason for each journal entry, and the documentation was lacking or missing. And I say it like that because it may have been somewhere at some point in time, but when we went to look at it, there was nothing attached to it. The city engaged the accounting firm of Rager, Lehman, and Houck to review journal entries on a monthly basis, and based on our testing, we found that that control was working. However, for the entries above, the reason for the journal entry was not self-explanatory, and any documentation to support the entry was not attached. So what I'm trying to say is that there was a control in place, and that was working. There were journal entries that we selected, and when we went to look at them, we couldn't find the support. Was there support? It might have been. It might have gotten detached. It might have gotten misfiled, but when we went to look at them, we weren't able to figure out why they needed to be made. Again, management is responsible for implementing an effective control environment and ensuring that journal entries are properly supported and recorded. We were not able to determine the cause. It might have just been simply an oversight. I mean, we may just happen to have picked those few entries that didn't have the support. I mean, that could be possible. Many of them did have the support, and like I mentioned, the control was working with Rager, Lehman signing off each month. We recommend that supporting documentation be maintained for all journal entries. And I say this too because often in our world, we say we'll get back to that. You know, I'll attach it later, and you may never get around to the later where you actually attached it. So there very well may have been something, it just, again, didn't get attached to what we were looking at. Any questions? This was probably one of our more challenging audits for a variety of reasons. Anytime there is turnover in staff, especially in a key position, it makes the audit more challenging. Our preliminary fieldwork was done in June, and that went off without a hitch. And then in July is when the staff turnover occurred. We knew that Rager, Lehman was going to be part of the team to get prepared and ready for the audit, and they did do a very nice job. Knowing that there was going to be a gap, we did postpone the audit to start a few weeks later than what we had originally agreed to, allowing Rager, Lehman staff and the existing staff of the city additional time to pull the items together, and that seemed to work very well. We did substantial field work in September and early October, and then we halted. And that's when the analysis needed to be done on the restricted cash. And we got the last piece of information right after the holidays. So we were scurrying to pull everything together, but we knew that that was the last piece of information that was needed to complete the draft. So we're happy to be here tonight. And again, I have to thank Bobby Jo for her hard work.
Anyone have any questions? January 22nd is the update.
You're back in good hands now, the mayor's not here.
Apologize for being late. Today's opening of the day of the legislature, and I was down for a legislative committee meeting and a welcoming reception for the delegates and senators, but
We're glad you made it.
almost made it back. If I would have found a parking place in the parking lot, I would have been on time. I had to park right. Anyone from the audience like to make any comments or questions? Thank you, Coral, for kicking things off, and thank you, folks, for your report.
Okay. So you're probably wondering too, this report is due by the end of the month. We did request a 3-month extension from the state of Maryland. This report would have normally been due on October 31st, and with Bobby Jo coming in new and not sure exactly how long it would take to resolve some of the outstanding questions, we went ahead and asked for the 90-day extension, which takes us to about 26th? 29th. So we think we're on target. We do have some open questions that we're working on. Do you want me to share what some of them are? Yes, please. Okay. So one of the open questions currently, and you guys may be very aware of the issue on whether or not there is any more restricted assets out there. And I keep forgetting what we call them. Program open space. Does that ring a bell to anybody? Okay.
Impact fees.
Yeah.
So when we got together and we were reviewing the draft, the question came up and said, why don't I see any park impact fees shown here? I thought there was available money. And our response was, we thought it had been spent. So we're now in the process of just backpedaling to confirm either way that any monies that were collected from park impact fees have either been properly spent or there is a piece that will show as restricted in the final draft, the final report here. And again, Bobby Jo and I are in the very early stages of going back, because from the time that we picked up the audit for the city, there was never any restriction showing. And I'm not sure that the monies came in and any significant amounts of money came in during our tenure. It seems like they may have come in prior to that, prior to 2009. Does that sound maybe familiar?
That would be,
That,
when we saw the housing market
Yes.
die,
that's what I'm thinking prior to that.
So what I think happened, and I'm just telling what I think happened, in order to make sure that we didn't lose track of the money, it got put in a separate bank account. But as money was being spent, it never got transferred out of that restricted account. So to someone looking at the city's records today, it gives the appearance as if there's several $100,000 still sitting here for park impact fees. I think it was probably more along the line, we set up a separate bank account and failed to transfer the funds as they were being used for various things over the course of various years. Maybe because, and I don't remember if this was in a CD, it may have started in a CD account and then.
Some is in a CD and some is in a CD.
So if you put in a CD, it's, again, depending on the term, you can't touch it as quickly, so I might have spent it and I used my unrestricted monies and I never moved it once the CD came up for maturity. So we're in the process of confirming. We can look at the books and records and say there were significant expenditures for park activities from 2009 forward that would make us believe that there is nothing left. But I want to make certain that everyone is on the same page. And so we will be meeting with management over the next week or so to get a firm handle on whether or not there should be anything shown as restricted for park impact fees. Currently, we're saying not. Okay? And we hope we hope and think that we should be able to get that resolved between now and the end of the month. Anything else to add?
All right,
It's the one?
questions one more time? Thank you very much. We've got a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks where we'll
Sure we will.
Yeah. So we're dismissed.
Next, we have resolutions, ordinances, and agreements for adoption on Monday. We will have the appointment of a Parks and Recreations Committee member, Rosalind Altman, who will be replacing Cynthia Hand, who has resigned because of other
We can't, yeah, they can't.
other issues. Better? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I'll get right on top of it. Rosalind Altman's resume is in the package, and hopefully be able to approve her on Monday. Anybody have any questions or comments on that appointment? Next will be the resolution for the annexation of the Stumptown Road properties, 2013-18. Jay, any further comments on that?
Yeah, there's been some developments on that. As you recall, we were working to get an easement for the sidewalk, or sidewalk easement along Stumptown Road. And right now, recently, this past week, we've talked with their title company to get the easement drawn up. So they don't have the easement for us. It also may involve us amending the annexation agreement. One of the things that I'm concerned with is getting the easement, getting everything in place may take longer than the actual annexation. So if we amend the annexation agreement to put a requirement in it that says they must give us this easement, then it's contractually bound. Right now, we're just saying we want it, and they could say yes, but if the annexation goes through, we don't have anything binding anybody. So if we amend the annexation agreement, then they're bound. We can finalize the annexation. We can get the sewer and everything connected, which was the problem in the first place, and then work out the details later, because unlike things in the past where we said, well, hey, they'll put a sidewalk in one day, we actually have something in writing that says that will happen. So that's where we are on that. So my recommendation is this month that you just keep it pending and you don't take any action on Monday. You just keep it on the pending list.
All right. Next is the approval of the MTBE lawsuit settlement.
Okay, this is good news. It's not quite big check news, if you all remember the big check. Okay, so let me give you the background. The city participated with 21 other municipalities across the country that involved 8 states. 7 of those municipalities were from Maryland. And we brought an action, a class action, against the gasoline refiners in the United States for putting methylene tributyl ethylene in gasoline. Okay, that was a thing that was put into gasoline. It's man-made. It leaks out of the tanks and it infects the water sources in town. So back in 2000, probably 9 or 10, we brought that action, and in 2011 we were successful in winning a verdict of $615,000. So by the time the city actually got their check, it was a net check for $400,000 to the city. And the good news for the city is, yes, we were compensated for pollution that was done, but it's even better in the fact that the city had already taken steps to remediate the pollution. So there's no pollution in the water. This is really recouping what we had spent. We went after most of the refiners, and some of them were in bankruptcy, and some of them did not agree to the settlement. And so about a year ago, we had another settlement with one of the refiners that was about $24,000 and netted the city about $16,000. So we said there were still 2 more out there that we still hadn't gotten to. And so at this point in time, we've gotten to those 3 at this point. And it's basically Crown Central was one of them, Gulf Oil Limited, and Getty Petroleum Marketing. And so coming up with a settlement, this isn't going to be big numbers, but we actually received a settlement to the city will be $2,654. So not a huge amount, but it is a big amount. That's the gross. You're going to net off of that about $2,000. So $2,000 checks coming in. To do this, of course, you need to approve the settlement agreement because we obviously are settling out of court. You already authorized all of this action years ago when I had you pass a resolution on this matter, but the actual settlement agreement needs to be agreed upon. A copy is in your packet, and it's very straightforward. We're releasing them from liability, which towards the town is no big deal because there is no more pollution, and you'll get a check for about $2,000. That's it. So on Monday, you need to take an action to do that.
Questions for Jay?
I have one on point number 12 on page 5. It says, "The law of the state of New York shall govern any dispute regarding or arising from this agreement." Just curious as to why that's in New York.
That's where the class action was filed.
Okay.
Anyone else? Next is the reclassification, or ratification of the amendment of the contract sale for the Garrett property.
That's me again, too. We're all familiar that the town is under contract to buy open space that butts Fringer Road that is owned by the Garrett family, and have been in negotiations with them some time, and we entered a contract of sale back in October to purchase part of the farm. And the problem was the farm is land and it's also buildings at front of Fringer Road. The city's intent is to buy this property to increase the acreage for its Bollinger Park. Okay, that's what it's going to do. It's going to preserve it for parkland. But obviously, we don't need ponds, buildings, and houses to do that. So we needed to create a division between that area and the part that we want. We don't want to buy it all. We only want to use the part that's the parkland. So basically, all behind the houses on Fringer Road is the land we're talking about. Basic boundary line then would be used to determine actually how much acreage we're agreeing to buy. Remember, we agreed to pay a per acre price. So, long and short of it is, the surveyor has come back with actually the boundary line that we want. We've run it by the owner, and the owner is agreeable to it as well. And so it's going to be a little less than the acreage that we talked about. And off the top of my head, I think we were talking about 42 acres, and this might be 41.2 acres. I mean, it's in the neighborhood. We're in the decimals. What this does is it leaves him about 6.15 acres for his area so that he can have a backup septic area. We don't know if it'll perk, and that's not our problem. But this will give him a backup area so that when he does something with the house, because eventually it needs to have something done with it, he'll meet the health department requirements, he hopes. So that's what the contract of sale does. We defined it, we attached an exhibit. It also put a deposit down. Now that we know what we're buying, we're actually going to put money down to do that, so we gave him a deposit on that. And the only outstanding issue then, before we can go to settlement, is the right-of-way. We talked about part of our agreement with him is we need to have access to this property because we can't get to it from Bollinger Park too easy. We need some way that we can send a mower in or whatever. And so we'll call it the northern and southern access that we're looking at. One abuts the southern border of his property near where the ruins of the barn are, and one abuts the northern. Unfortunately, neither of those provide the adequate site distance under the county standards. I mean, we had the surveyors go out and measure, and neither one actually does. So we're not sure exactly which one, or if there's another choice that we may have. That has to be worked out before we can go to settlement. So we're going to try to work that out next week. But that's all that's holding us up, and then we'll go to settlement, and it should hopefully be done by the end of the month. So what's before you tonight is the mayor signed this contract before Christmas, before the holiday, when we actually had to go ahead and do that. And so we need you all on Monday night to actually vote to ratify his action. And the other thing, which was major, but really minor, was remember our contract was with the estate, and the estate no longer was entitled because the estate transferred it to Dave Garrett. Now the contract is with Dave Garrett. So we've covered all our bases on that. So Monday night, if you vote on that, everything will be fine.
Questions for that? All right. And finally, we'll consider resolutions 2014-21, the water allocations for January, as we do each month. Any questions on that? Next, we have the city manager's report. Henry.
Okay, not much has changed. Under the capital projects, we've got the fiber network. Everything's connected and installed, and we're functioning with it. We're looking at exploring new ways to use that, particularly with access to the county. So that's up and running. Antrim mini storage is pretty much status quo on that one. Well 17, we're still having problems with the engineering design of the ventilation system. Just can't seem to get anybody off dead center on that.
That's been going on for a couple
It's
of
been
months.
dragging, it doesn't seem like it's that big a deal to me, based on how it's been described. I mean, it sounds like it could be fixed by somebody going in there that knew what they were doing.
There you go.
That is most problems.
That's it, huh? We just need someone who knows what they're doing. CDM is involved in that.
That is correct.
Anyone else just?
Yeah, well, CDM is they engineered it, designed it, and they have a contractor that is to implement their design. And the best I can tell you is, I'm going to say the same thing I did last month, is there's logical sequences that have to happen. And out of those sequences, certain actions occur. Apparently that's not working. In other words, if the sensor detects that there's chlorine in the atmosphere, in the interior, it turns on the blowers and does X, Y, and Z. And that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I've asked Rick, and we've talked to CDM, we've talked to the contractor, and they're just having difficulty getting this to work.
Are we in a condition where the contractor says, I implemented his design, and it's not working?
Now, I
And
don't,
CDM says, he didn't implement my design, that's why it's not working? Are we in that type of contest? It's
potentially,
taken 3 months?
potentially. And I'm gonna, I'm gonna get a hold of CDM, and I'm also gonna call the contractor as well and see if that's the case. And I'll have that answer for you on Monday.
Thank you. 'Cause I've seen too many of those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did my job, I did my job.
yeah. Okay, Creamery, the demolition grant, well, we're still waiting to hear the results on that. Employee manual, well, we met in December, and we met again just yesterday, and set up a schedule with Angelo that we're gonna meet every week until we get it done. Angelo has this optimism. I have the pessimism. After 3.5 years of working on this, is just like the never-ending story. This doesn't seem, every time you touch it, it seems like there's something else that kind of pops out.
Yeah, the hardest part so far has been employee benefits, mainly because we can't find documentation. Things have been going on for years. And we just don't know where it's written.
Well, I think,
What you will see is a documentation of the benefits as we interpret them. We have no choice. And as they're being implemented today.
we need to evaluate our benefit program based on today and not the way it was 20 years ago.
No, it's not, we're not doing that. Basically, there's a lot of things that are I guess you could say they're more word-of-mouth history.
I mean, the point I'm trying to make is, if you looked at any industry, and you took a spot 15 or 20 years in the past and looked at a set of benefits, and then took that same industry and looked at them today, they're a whole lot different. So what I'm saying is, we can't be shackled to what we've always done. In other words, we've got to make sure that we're up to date and current with the type of benefits program that we're offered, that is comparable to other folks in our industry, basically city government. So, I mean, what I'm saying is, don't be bogged down by the fact that, well, these benefits have always been offered. Do we need to continue to offer them, or do we need to change them? Do we need to modernize them? Do we need to revise them? What do we need to do?
And that will take you even longer.
No, to me, we are doing that. We're looking at,
Have you looked at
All
any
right.
comparisons, industry-wide comparisons?
industry.
You haven't done any of that?
No.
That's what I'm saying, that will take you
The
even
only thing we're
longer.
doing is trying to get documented what we have.
And
Okay.
we have a set of employee benefits, okay, that have changed over the years. You'll find that under new business item 4, I will talk about one of those. Okay, but they have changed. A number, maybe 2-3 years ago, we changed some other items that have been implemented, and they didn't find their way into the manuals. So we're trying to pick up all that type of stuff that hasn't been done, and trying to find out why that some people have one set of benefits and somebody else has some other set of benefits.
That shouldn't happen, right?
Well,
Well, it will,
it
and it
did,
does.
because people were grandfathered in when we made changes. And then some people were allowed in the past to negotiate benefits, which is not happening anymore. So, you know, it gets rather complicated.
It may come down to just saying, this is what our benefit package.
And that's what it'll be. It'll be defined in the book, which everybody, you know, the council will get a look at the book and get their shot at it.
All right.
But it will define what the pet benefit package is as of the day we sign the book.
All right. Anyone have anything for Henry? Henry, do you have anything else for us?
Well, yeah, I do have one other thing, and it's not on here, and basically, you know, when I came back to work on Monday, I realized it was July. No, had July on my mind, that's what I had, but it was January. And so what we did was we kicked off the budget cycle, as should be done in January. So sometime in the near future, probably try and hold some dates for our sessions, our budget sessions. We'll probably be doing that sometime in March. So take a look at your calendars and see what you got. And maybe towards the middle of, would you say, Bobby Joe, would you say like the middle?
The mayor got a copy of it and Carl got a copy of it.
No, that's not my question.
I don't know off the top of my head.
You don't
I
know
have
when
that.
you're gonna ask them to,
No, it was already set in the schedule. The schedule already stated what days they were going to meet.
You want to see that, Henry? I have a copy of it here.
I don't have a copy of that. Okay, so March 26th is your day. I hope you're all clear for that day.
What's the time that's
What
at?
time?
I don't know.
You don't have the time, Dan.
March is 2 months away,
Yeah,
2.5 months away. All right, any questions for Henry or for the departmental reports?
You want to set the time now?
Why not?
Yeah,
Well, you might as well. You want to do it early or late? Because this is not bound by any time schedules in our charter.
What day of the week is March 24th?
Wednesday. 26th, you said, right?
Huh?
March the 26th?
26th?
Wednesday.
That's good. Well, you better go early, because it'll take forever.
Yeah, I agree. 6:30?
Six? Yeah.
6:30, 6, I don't care.
6:30.
6:30, all right. Going once.
6:30 is good.
That's for the final?
I must have to work till 6.
No, that's, I don't know. Typically, we have one, and if we get finished, then we're okay. And if we don't get finished, we set the next
Another
one.
one, yeah.
Okay, but that's our first look at the
That's the
budget.
first meeting, yeah. We get it done all in one night, good. Not, we'll have to set another date.
Okay.
All right. Jay, comments from the legal report.
Okay, I'm sorry I don't have it in writing for you, but things have just been going mile a minute over here. But there are 4 things that I want to talk to you tonight about. The first is a subject that we've been working on for months, if not years, but it's finally come to fruition, and that's code enforcement. I know. It's a Christmas present to our code enforcement officer, even though he's getting late. It's past 3 Kings Day and everything now. But anyway, here's the story of what the code enforcement. As you know, he handles code enforcement on a routine basis, and then there are problem code enforcement issues where we have repeated violations or violations that are just flaunted. Nobody cleans them up. And we've worked with people, we've tried to talk to him. I mean, he does that on his own, and it really never has involved you, it never has involved me, and that works 99% of the time. So we're down to the 1%. What happens when this 1% just doesn't get with the program? We have always tried to work with people with that, and the reason is we're a small town, you know all these people, but the other reason is you really don't want to spend money on fees and legal fees and going to court to get somebody to do something they should do anyway. So it always seems like you just want to knock on their door and say, hey, this is what you need to do. Well, there's one issue that's been going on, and this involves the property on West Baltimore Street, and it's abutting rear property on Memorial Drive that has had basically junk around, junk cars, junk things, junk items laying around. And the theory that has come out, and I'm going to make it all sound really nice, right? The theory that's come out is that the city has spent a tremendous amount of money, of its taxpayers' money, to make Baltimore Street as pleasing as it can be so that you can encourage business and pedestrians and all the good stuff that small town is. It's time for the citizens that are along those places to follow the rules. You don't have to do anything extra, just follow the rules. So this property on West Baltimore Street that, again, in the rear butts Memorial Drive, has been talked to over a period of time. It's gotten visits from the code enforcement, from the city manager, even I went out there. And basically what we want to do is we want to use this as a test. We want to basically give the property owner a list of these are all the violations we expect you to clean, we expect you to deal with. And we're going to document those with not only in writing, but here's the pictures of what we expect to deal with. And we want them to sign basically what we're going to call an abatement agreement, saying we could take you to court, we would win, and we would spend a lot of money, and you would spend a lot of money, and after everybody spent everybody's money and been all upset with each other, then we're going to clean the property. Or we can be reasonable and say, this is the expectation we have of what you need to do, this is the time period we want you to do it in, we can give them whatever time it takes, reasonably, and sign the agreement that says you do it. If you don't do it, then you've breached our agreement, and that gives us an option to either go to court under a breach of contract instead of code enforcement, which is a totally different way to do it, or the agreement actually consents for the city to come onto the property and do the cleaning itself. So there's some deal. Now, we don't know whether or not this is going to work. We've asked the property owner, this is what we want to do. We haven't shared the agreement with the property owner. I wanted to bring it to your attention at this point in time because this becomes very real for us, is that if we do this and the property owner doesn't comply, you really are in a corner where you have no other alternative but to spend the money that you need to spend to have the property cleaned up. And the issue you're always going to hear is, well, what about my neighbor, or what about the place around the street? And the theory that we have is we can only really focus our resources, because this is it, there's not really many other people to enlist, on one issue at a time. And that's what you all have said you wanted to do. So the abatement agreement I'm bringing to your attention, we're going to send it out next week. If the property owner signs it, then we're going to come back to you and we're going to get the mayor to sign it and expect you all just to ratify it because it's the best that we can deal with. And it's not really, I guess, right at this point in time to get into the details in a public session, but if you're interested, we can talk about that. So that's how we're going to handle the property on West Baltimore Street that abuts Memorial Drive that has like the old gas station on it. Okay, everybody knows what we're talking about. Okay, I'll move into my next item then. Since we've been so successful in our heads in dealing with this already, right? We haven't done anything, but it seems wildly successful on our part. We're going to bite off more than we can chew, and we're going to start a program where the mayor brought this up at the last meeting and said, we really need to do something along with that theory of we spent a lot of money on making Main Street. We need to do something with ground zero. And you would all, I think, agree that ground zero for Main Street is the intersection up here that you call the square. And it's time for property owners to put their part. And so while we can't go after everybody all the time and try to hold their hand or tell them what's wrong, we've selected a quadrant. And we'll go maybe quadrant by quadrant. And this isn't unheard of. They do this in Baltimore where they pick a problem block and they say we're going to focus everybody on this block and then we're going to move to the next block. So the quadrant we decided to work with is the northwest quadrant. So it's not this side of the street, it's that side of the street on the north side. And basically we're going to go to the property owners, we're going to try to do it one at a time and say, here's what our issue is. Here's what we'd like you to try to accomplish. If there's violations of the code, we're going to try to have you fix them. If not, we're going to take enforcement action. But realizing the old adage that you can catch more flies with honey than you can with vinegar, there's also an idea that the code enforcement officer came up with that says maybe there's an incentive for some of these downtown properties, that the second floors of the building we're talking about in specific, which would be the first one on the corner, is not really usable space. You can't access it for commercial because you don't have ADA, and you can't rent it for apartments because it doesn't comply with the downtown zone. So the honey could be, hey, you need to spend some money fixing up your property, but it's a business property. We can change the zoning to allow you to use the second floor for a dwelling, because right now you can't do that unless you get a variance. So there's a way to do it, but it's hard. We can change that to allow you to do that so that you can actually get the second floor occupied, you get more people downtown, you have more revenue coming in, so your property would look better. I mean, that's all the theory. And I'm really smiles and thinking maybe people will do that. I really don't want to have to get the hammer out, which is what we usually do. So the letter we talked about last month of how we're going to approach the property owner. We said, hey, we're going to write them a letter. And the letter that's going to go out, if you all agree to this approach, is we really want you to participate. We really want you to try to bring your building up to code, not just town code, but all the other codes. And we also want to help you by changing the law so that you can make more revenue off of your building, which is why you own it in the first place. So work with us and we'll work with you is the idea of how we're going to do that. We felt that that approach would be the nice approach first. And if the nice approach doesn't work, well, then we'll do the not so nice approach next.
Let us not shoot ourselves in the foot here by doing that for that specific property. Can this cause problems, maybe good things in other properties, but could it cause problems of any sort somewhere else?
The changing of the zoning that I'm talking to probably should be done anyway, okay, under your Sustainable Communities Plan, and
Yeah.
you know, Jim Weebrick's pointed this out to you in the past, so I'm just the mouthpiece for him at this point. These are his ideas. But you should be done anyway because you have these old buildings that you want people to do things with, and the theory was always you really want retail downstairs and residential upstairs, and so that needs to happen, and your code is not allowing that. The theory that you're going to go and talk to every individual property one at a time is going to get expensive, right? Because we really don't want to go to every property owner and say, hey, by the way, we want you to clean up your place. So we're really trying to pick the most bang for the buck. And that's why we chose that corner, because that is sitting on the corner. The other corners have already done theirs, so this is the last corner, and if you can build that piece of the puzzle, then maybe we move down the street, and some of them aren't commercial, and maybe you move up the street this way, and you deal with some of the signing issues and things like that. The problem we have, as we had in our meeting, and the mayor can tell you about this, because we got all on board with the same page, is sometimes there's not town codes that are being violated. And this goes back to what the mayor brought up months ago of, well, maybe we need to have a maintenance code or things like that. You hate to have to do more regulation because the town only enforces certain codes and the county only enforces certain codes, and we can't make the county do things. But you hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, hey, we're going to do it. That long-winded approach of what I'm telling you is we're really going to try to work with the property owners and see whether this happens. Historically, we haven't had much success with property owner feedback. It's unfortunate that the honey actually doesn't work as well as the vinegar with some of the property owners. In which case, we're fully prepared to prosecute that just like we are with the other one. And we think that we'll get the owner's attention by doing that.
Well, I think if you do that a few times, people will take notice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the lawyer that likes to go to court all the time. Nobody likes the fact that we're going to have to bring government to your door and say, if you don't. But there's some times when the city has spent $5 or $6 million trying to make downtown look nice, that the neighboring property owners, most of them who have already done it, need to do their part too. And we're trying to help. So that's the theory that we're going to try to approve. And if it doesn't work, then the mayor's going to be back to you saying, we need to do some maintenance standards in this town. And then we need to do the corresponding code enforcement. And the one thing that we talked about that we never talked about, it was an interesting meeting, is we talked about the fiscal ramifications of doing this. This costs money. Not money to help people fix their facade, but money to help pay lawyers and pay code enforcement and hire outside code inspectors because, again, you can't rely on the county inspectors if we're trying to do this. It's just like spending money for your police department, right? You want a safe community, so you spend money to the police and you never hope you get any money back. It's the same type of theory. So we're going to try that. Those letters are going to go out this month if you're agreeable to this theory. We can talk about it more on Monday, but that's the best we could come up with for trying to deal with starting to make the square perfect. Okay. Two more items. These will hopefully go quicker. When the museum left across the street and moved to buy the building down the street on Baltimore Street, they came in, they had to get a special exception or the variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. And part of the process that night was, oh, are you guys going to have a sign? Because if you're going to have a sign, you need to tell us. And they were caught off guard, the BZA's caught off guard, and you realize how that is. That's like a mini court proceeding. You can't just say, well, come back to us later. You got to file the whole thing again. So they said, yeah, we want to use the same sign that we had. Well, apparently, long story short, the same sign that they had is not going to work because it sits further back and it's too small. And of course, you know, the bad guys, the city's not letting us put the sign up because now it is in a residential district. And there's really no signage in residential. And so talking again with the code enforcement officer who changed his hat and put his zoning administrator hat on, talking with him, he basically says that, you know what we need to do? We probably need to talk about putting some type of limited signage for places that are residential but have a commercial operation, you know, along Baltimore Street, you know, those types of things. So that that person doesn't have to spend $600 to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to put a sign up that says, in this case, museum. So if you're agreeable to that, we're going to start rolling out some language for you. And we know that you love sign language, right? Not sign language with your hands, but dealing with signs. And you know it's a 2-month process to get done. And you also know that anytime you see Mr. Naylor, he will ask you what's the status of it because he wants his museum sign up. So unless you have some real problems, now we realize that the downside is we want to create this so that somebody in the middle of Meadowbrook isn't putting a big sign up that says, I have an in-home whatever. You know, we want to create it so that residential is still residential, but the thought would be we would use size-appropriate signs. You know, if you're having a little sign out, that may not be a big deal. If you have a huge sign out, that might be something your neighbors would care about, so.
Didn't we just go through a BZA,
Right.
huh,
Go ahead.
with, on that sign out there?
On the museum sign?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, when we were doing the museum hearing, that was the 11th hour, almost while we were walking out the door. Oh, by the way, we need
Yeah.
to have a sign. And the flack everybody's getting is, well, we didn't know we need to ask for one, or we would have had more.
I hear that every morning at
And-
breakfast.
Right, and, you know, you didn't know, but we're supposed to do your work for you. I mean, we try to help, but we can't, if we'd have done something, we wouldn't have done it right anyway, right? So the theory is, maybe they're right. Maybe there needs to be something so that you can address the places along Main Street, or your Main Street. So unless you hate that idea, you don't have to talk about it again. We're going to start working on some language.
Well, I don't know, 6, 8, 9 months ago, a year ago, whatever, a young lady came in making the same request for in-house businesses to put a small sign on the yard.
Right.
And at the time, we said, no.
And that's the balance we're going to have, because you're very controlling of your signs. You usually don't like signs, and now you're going to allow signs. And the theory was always, you're not going to have them unless you get approved by the BZA, but the BZA is an expensive process to go through to put a little sign up. So, like everything, we'll pull the rabbit out of the hat and see whether you like it.
Jim?
Well, just a side note on that, the idea is we allow certain non-residential uses in residential districts, but our sign code doesn't speak to them. So we allow things like doctor's office, dentist offices in residential districts, but per the code, there's nothing that says what kind of sign they can have to them. So this would address things that are allowed, not home-based businesses, but actual businesses or things like libraries or community centers that are permitted in the district, but don't have signage regulations that apply to them. So it wouldn't be opening the door to home occupation businesses or anything like that.
Okay, any more on signs?
I have one, go ahead, Blake.
Jay, what zoning change are you referring to in regards to the building?
Which building?
The one on the corner?
Oh, okay, that one. Right now, and Jim Weeper can explain it better than me, but you cannot have a dwelling on the second floor because the zoning code requires a bigger lot than what those small lots in the downtown have. So you would basically, and you can get that if you can get your variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. So if you wanted it, you could go try to get it through the process. This would basically change the lot requirement, the area requirement, so that you could.
Or you're talking about residential units?
That's what the theory would be.
What's the code say about parking restrictions?
Well, see, that's the problem with downtown, is that you don't have to provide parking. That's the corollary issue.
Years ago you did,
Well, I mean,
when that changed.
in downtown, for businesses in the downtown, there is an exemption for parking. Now, the property that we're talking about specifically has its own parking.
Yeah, but I'm talking about business, two and a half parking places per dwelling unit.
I don't know, we'd have to look that up.
That used to be on the list.
It's,
So if you put a parking space there, you'd have to have 2.5 parking. Where do they have it?
well, the building in question does, because they own the parking lot that's down the next street down. They own that parking lot. So while every building we're talking about would have that problem, this specific building would not.
Even though there's a house in between the parking lot.
Well, I mean, they own the parking lot. I mean, yeah, there's lots of issues. This isn't perfect, but neither is what we're dealing with. So this is just ideas right now. I mean, we're trying to figure out how can we solve the problem that we've been having, which is a landowner who doesn't live here, who doesn't live there, not taking care of their building to your standards. And why aren't they doing that? Because that costs money. And so how can we help them help us? So yeah, it's not perfect yet. We got to figure this out. that's where we're headed.
I still have a problem. This goes back to the building that we are now using, that used to be. I just found this out today, I didn't know it. Does the museum still have items stored there?
No, that's not aware of.
Someone told me today that there's still some of those high school pictures there,
Yes, that's true, it's in the safe.
in the safe. Yeah. Are they going to get those out of there?
I hope so.
I hope so too. I would hate like heck to see those be lost.
Right, I think I have to talk to George and tell him.
Okay, well,
Okay,
I'll probably see him
all right.
at breakfast.
I will worry about this then, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, the last item I had, we're getting off of that, this is now a council issue. As you know, there's lots of new procedures being implemented here in the city. The new treasurer's come on board and put some different issues and things, trying to make everything function more professionally and more predictably. And one of the issues that we've had, which was not necessarily documented, dealt with review of council expenditures. You realize that. And not just council expenditures, but all the expenditures in the city of who reviews the expenditures, and it's the department heads and the logical people. But when you get up higher to the top of the pyramid, eventually get to the top and there's nobody above it to review things. And so the mayor has nobody to review his. And the way the procedure was last year was the mayor had the city manager review it. The city manager wasn't really comfortable with that because the mayor's the boss. I mean, that's an obvious one. So I recalled, and this is what I was telling the new treasurer, was that at our last retreat that we had, we talked about this and we had said, well, it would be better that since no one can really approve their own, that one of the council members would review, for example, if the mayor submits an expense report, somebody would review his so that he doesn't review his own, in other words, and you don't get Henry in that situation. And I recall that person was going to be Councilman Ebal at the time, now Mayor Pro Tem Ebal. Something like that needs to be in place so that you're not signing your own, basically. You can change whoever it is, and you maybe want to talk about this at the retreat, but this isn't for all expenditures. It should be just for what I'll call self-interested ones. And we're all clear on what I'm talking about, so that if, Councilman Hess has an expenditure, the mayor can look at that and say, yeah, okay, that's no problem. But when the mayor would have one, who's going to look at his? And so it should be one of you, because you're all on the equal tier at the top of the pyramid. Think about that. You can decide about it, but I was asked to look at whether the charter would have a problem with that. This isn't about signing checks. This isn't about administrative. This is more of a rule that you all are putting in place to govern your own self. So think about how you want to deal with that, and let me know so you can let Bobby Joe know. Okay, that's all I have.
Any questions for Jay? All right, let's move into unfinished business. First item is cleaning services. You have something to offer for us further on that?
No, you don't know the story. Last council meeting, you were supposed to make a decision, and apparently that didn't happen, as to whether we're going to continue with the way we're doing it now, or to go out and solicit a cleaning service.
So that's what we'll decide on Monday.
Yes.
Anybody have any questions on where we stand on that issue?
Yeah, I think for Monday, we should have a written plan as to how you intend to implement having the cleaning done by present employees. Personally, I like that, but I'd like to know how it would actually be accomplished, how we would pay them, when the work would be done, that type of thing. But
Certainly reasonable
personally,
request.
I would prefer to keep the job in-house, but I would also like to make sure we're legal in how we reimburse them for their time.
I think that portion is,
So we're all on the same, because you all need to think about, we'll work on it best we can. The problem we have is that if you have a non-exempt employee, we'll call that an hourly employee, that's not necessarily the case, but an hourly employee that does work for us, because we're the employer, beyond 40 hours a week, we owe them time and a half. for what they do. Regardless of whether you have other side agreements or with them, they need to be paid at least time and a half for their hours. If you have an exempt employee, meaning a salaried employee in our case, exempt from those fair state labor standards, they aren't entitled to get time and a half. You know, they can get comp time, they can get other things, but they're not entitled to that. So the situation that we have, my understanding is you have an hourly or an exempt and a non-exempt employee that do this task. I don't have any idea how long it takes, but obviously it's in addition to the 40 hours for the hourly employee, and now this other employee is an exempt employee. How do you pay them? If you could come up with, we'll pay, I'm making up the numbers, $100. You just have to do it. We're not taking track of the hours. You have to do $100. That would work for the exempt employee. Yeah, I'm getting $100 extra for a different task. That wouldn't work for the non-exempt employee because they're still working hours towards over 40 hours. So you would violate fair labor standards if that didn't calculate back to be the hourly rate times 1.5. So maybe it would if you did it mathematically, but that's what I'm saying is that it has to work out. If you're paying your employees, then it needs to be withheld, right? It's a W-2 income. You have to pay that as part of their salary. If you're paying a company or a sole proprietor that's not employed, well then it's a 1099 expense. You pay them $100 and they do it. So it sounds more complicated than it is. It's pretty simple. You know, how much are you going to pay to get the office cleaned? Who are you going to pay it to? Once you do that, I can tell you whether it's legal or not.
Could they come back as, under a contract, private contract, as their own
Right.
1099?
Yeah. If you did it that way.
Insured?
If you're going to require, we usually require everybody to have insurance and things like that. I mean, that's the problem is that you run afoul probably of your procurement laws. Although it's a service contract, it's a less than, I don't know how much we pay, I'm assuming it's less than $25,000 for this. So how do you do that? Because now you're not paying them W-2 money, you're going to pay them 1099, they need to have a business entity, they need to be legit business at that point. It doesn't have to be incorporated entity, but it has to be something. It just gets almost really complicated at that point in time. Maybe there's a way around it. My problem is I don't have the numbers. You know, I can't tell you how much we're paying and what the hourly rates are, but that tells me whether or not we're going to violate fair labor standards. And I guess my issue, this is non-legal now, but if I was cleaning the place and I was getting time and a half and that eats extra dollars, I'm not going to do it for you unless I at least got what that was before.
Oh, yeah, agreed.
So if it's still X dollars, then you'll probably meet the Fair Labor Standards Act requirement. But I really don't know the details of how we did it before. So I guess we have some homework to do by Monday.
An issue I think we need to define how this is going to work. It needs to be clear that the cleaning services aren't performed during working hours, even if we can figure out how to pay the person if it's an hourly or a wage person. But I think you need some kind of document that needs to be signed by the employee that enters into this contract where, well, this needs cleaning up, I'll do that right now. So that person spends an hour doing that task because it's at hand, then ends up working an hour overtime because you didn't get her work done, or he didn't get her work done. So that's the kind of stuff that you have to be
It's got to be after
careful
hours.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be after hours, there's no doubt.
Yeah, and none of it has been performed during the normal hour. Or, what you can do is to make that part of the task and have it done during working hours. There's no cost.
Well, again, I think the more we can, the more definition we can put on this situation, the better we're going to be in the future. Because like I said before, my opinion is that we're asking for trouble. You all can do what you want to do.
Here's what I would like, okay? This is my wish. Make a decision on Monday whether you're going to do, if you decide that you're going to go out and contract it out, not to worry about all this other stuff. I think we need to figure out first which way you're going to get.
But I can't decide
I
which way I
can't,
want to
right,
go
unless you
I know
tell me.
about what my options are.
Okay,
I've got to have my options defined.
all right.
Exactly.
But regardless, the mayor is correct. Whatever we do, we are going to have a written understanding.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
mean,
Yes,
that's definite. It's just what's above the signatures and after the date. I don't know.
They've got to be
Right.
treated no different than if it was somebody off the street.
Right.
You can't treat them any different.
So,
All right, we'll talk more about that
So-
Monday.
You know, I hear what you're saying. I guess I'm having a little difficulty with the direction. As far as, are we gonna set up a job description?
No, it's a separate contract.
A
They are not,
contract.
they are not city employees. Okay, it's got to be done outside the realm of the city employee.
If it's a contract.
Have to
then there
define
must
what
be-
hours it'll be performed.
Let me solve this real quickly, or at least put this to the table here. If there are if you're saying you're gonna put a contract to them, don't they have to be a legal entity?
well, not necessarily incorporated into, I mean, the issue, we're making this way complicated, okay?
Yeah.
Well,
But that's what we do. So,
yeah,
so we have the person, and they fall and they hit their head while they're cleaning. Are they employees at that point in time? Are they covered by workers' comp at that point in time? Or are they private individuals that are not covered by workers' comp, that need to have their own insurance, that those issues are a thing? If they hurt somebody else because they left the bucket out here, is it that person who's going to be responsible? Like we would hold an independent contractor saying you need to have your own liability insurance and we're the secondary? Or is it the citizen, is it the city because it's a city employee? We can figure that out. I mean, we can require that, but those are corollary issues that if you want to pull this thing apart, we need to. I mean, we did something that was very simple before. We had the employees do this and we paid them and it was great. Now we're making it a mountain of a molehill. But
Right, and-
we have to do it to
and I
protect
go
us.
back to, I go back to, the Wayback Machine, when Nina used to do the cleaning. We didn't have a contract with Nina,
Well, I mean,
but it was part of her job description to do that.
It's different.
that was what she was hired for and to do. That was part of her job description. You just said that.
That's right.
Any other contractor that deals with the city has to carry a level of liability insurance. $1 million, I don't know what it is, but if somebody is going to paint the garage in the back, they have to have a certain amount of liability insurance before we're allowed to hire them. It should be no different from anybody that does our cleaning. So, and again, there's a million things that we haven't thought about that are going to come to the forefront if we have an issue. Not only if the employee gets hurt, what happens if someone gets hurt because of the cleaning services neglect or oversight? Maybe they leave a scrub bucket in the middle of the hall and somebody trips over it. Then who pays?
We do, always. I mean, you just know that the city gets drug in no matter what. So the thing we can do is, the best thing is to try to protect us from the independent contractors, if that's what you're calling them. You know, that's how that has to go down. And my biggest concern comes back to the Fair Labor Standards Act issue, because an employee can't waive that, right? If they could, I could say, I'll only hire you if I'm going to pay you less than minimum wage, and that doesn't work.
Oh, no,
But-
yeah.
So if we're saying, and again, we put money to this, that what we would pay would make the hourly person still meet the money that they would have made to do the job at their salary times 1.5, then Fair Labor Standards isn't an issue anymore. Then it's all the other stuff.
But if going, how can you meet the mayor's criteria? That's my issue.
Which, the criteria that we're going to have,
Liability. That he doesn't want the city to be liable in any way.
I don't think you can.
I don't think so either.
If you hired a company, they would have insurance, and if they did something wrong, but
I mean, I think it's in the charter that we can't hire a company unless they have liability insurance.
under our,
They're not a company. That's, you know,
Well,
we keep going back to all these things.
let's-
and-
Let's be clear what we're really doing, okay? You can put any kind of lipstick on the pig. We are hiring employees, and we're paying them separately or in addition to their salary to do a different job. That's it. We're hiring employees to do that. So if you want to say that they're a company, if you want to say that, when everything goes down.
We're gonna 1099 these employees, right?
I would think if you're paying them that way, the way I just said, you're gonna have to W-2 those. You're gonna have to withhold. You cannot do it that way. And that's what I'm saying, is that it's all for nothing. If everything goes down and all the bad things happen, what is the plaintiff gonna say? You had 2 employees cleaning the place. You're responsible for them. End of story. You're not ever gonna get around that.
Yeah, and that's where I'm having a difficulty as well, is if you recall, going back again to at least 15 to 20 years ago, our police officers were doing duty at the haunted barn when it was down where the creamery is. One of our officers got injured. Some car hit him. You know who paid for that? We did. And why did we pay for that? Because an officer, as long as he's within inside the city boundaries, is still a city employee and on duty.
Maybe we're overthinking it.
Let
Let me back up and maybe just say that it started out to be a question of money, right? We were paying overtime hours. That's what caught your
Yes.
attention. It wasn't a question of all this. We had employees that were doing jobs we asked them to do, and we paid them, and we're saying, why are they generating overtime hours at all? We have the answer. It's because they were doing cleaning. They're going to still get the same amount of money. You're just trying to say it's not hourly anymore, it's this. The faster you do it, the quicker, the more you get paid. If that's the only issue we have, then let's do the calculations and find out how much money we're talking about. And it would seem that you just find out whether it's cheaper to hire our people to do it separately for this task, or whether it's cheaper to hire somebody else. The liability issues are neither here. I mean, if they cause a problem, the city's,
We're gonna pay.
we have liability. That's what we have insurance for. We have our insurance, so if our employees cause a problem, they're protected.
But even if, thinking that through even further, is if we hired a cleaning service, and if, as an example, there was something left on the floor that was slippery, and that person fell, we would still be accountable.
Right.
But we would have recourse with that. We might be initially responsible because it's our facility, but we would have recourse with that cleaning company for negligence, and it's their liability, that's the reason they have liability insurance, to protect us, or protect the city from their negligence.
Okay.
We might end up writing the check, but we're gonna get a check from them to compensate us for it.
That's the theory. Let me throw something else to confuse it. That's what the theory with the street sweeping was, right? If we had our own street sweeper, we'd go ahead and do it. And if we messed something up, people would sue us. And if we had a guy that did normal stuff, and we said, hey, on a couple days a week, you come in early and drive the street sweeper, we're gonna have to pay you X for that. Well, we didn't like the deal we had because we were unsure about the liability recourse. Cleaning the building, do we want to do it in-house or do we want to contract it out? If you want to do it in-house, you pay your people more. We can figure out what that is. I always thought this exercise was a exercise to limit our expenditures or make them known, because you were seeing.
Make them known.
You were seeing overtime that we don't know why or how much.
Where it came from.
And I make the numbers up. Maybe it was $300. Well, if it's $300, my thought was this was always about saying, all right, you clean the place, but you're only getting $300.
They've been doing this long enough, we should have some history.
Right.
I think that's what Angela wants as much as anything, that what is it actually costing us now? Yeah.
The reason you didn't see it before was because, I'm assuming now, that when Linda did this, it was done with the money that was sitting in an account that we were but we had budgeted for the cleaning service that we fired. So there was the money.
So we were looking at it under the name of the cleaning site, under Ocean Breeze.
Whoever that was, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what happened, yeah.
I guess that's what happened.
Yeah, which is what sent the red flag up when all of a sudden I see this big number in overtime.
Right.
What is this?
Because the money that was in that budget expired.
Right.
in-
And that's-
In June.
And we should be having a budget for cleaning, right? And that shouldn't be office clerical overtime, because that's something different. Does this help? Could we just get the numbers of what we're talking about?
Yes.
Just talk about, I mean, just find out what we're, I mean, there's got to be a way we know that, and figure out what that is, and then discuss it more after that.
Okay.
You can make that happen, right?
They're already done, you already emailed it to you.
Okay.
Good.
Wow.
And it's less than.
Didn't figure we were going to talk about that long.
Okay, maybe if I look at my email.
Now we-
Yeah, you wouldn't, then.
Now we have another issue that's got whiskers on it. And that's the FEMA flood plan. This was brought to my memory last week from an email from a mortgage company down in Eldersburg, wondering why the client couldn't get approved for a mortgage because we weren't certified under the FEMA flood plan. And that's kind of an issue. I thought we were in process. I thought everything was moving forward, but I learned that we really haven't talked about this thing for 2 years. We need to honestly move forward. This is not something that really we need to, it's just a matter of fact, something we have to do. No mortgage from a commercial lender can be issued without having that property certified that it's either in a floodplain or not in a floodplain. Now, since we don't participate in the FEMA floodplain program, theoretically, anybody that's in a floodplain can't get a mortgage in the city of Taneytown, because that person couldn't buy flood insurance to protect themselves.
Have you had that problem? Have you had that problem?
Have I had that problem?
Yeah,
No.
okay.
The normal thing is, everybody that does a mortgage, I'm speaking from personal experience here, everybody does a mortgage in the city, and in Maryland, I guess the world, pays $15 to a company that certifies that their property is not in a floodplain. And the flood certification people will look at the FEMA maps, locate the property. If it's not in a floodplain, they pay their $15 and they go on down the road. The problem comes when there's a property and it borders a floodplain or is close to a floodplain. They're not, the flood certification people aren't going to certify that property. So what's going to happen is the mortgage is going to get held up until then that person buys flood insurance. And that person can't buy flood insurance if he's in the city of Taneytown, because we don't participate.
Well, based on the emails that I got and read, the floodplain maps haven't been approved yet.
No, that's right. That's why I'm saying, well, there are a set of floodplain maps.
That's from 2 years.
There's an old set.
The government's not done.
Now, there's a set of floodplain maps. It's just not the current set of floodplain maps.
Okay.
We have never participated in the FEMA floodplain, because historically, up until probably the last 15 or 20 years, they hadn't been any floodplains in Taneytown, so it wasn't an issue. But now there are. And there's not many, there's only a few. But we just need to say, okay, we participate, and that solves the problem.
What's it cost us to participate?
I'm not sure it cost us anything.
Does it?
Well,
We went through this.
yeah,
Yeah, we did, and I can't
It
remember.
allows the people
cost us
to,
heavy.
for not doing anything to see the folder is really thick, because every couple of years we.
Well,
bring it
besides
out.
what he's charging, I was like.
Right. Maybe if I charge more, we'll take it seriously. Okay, I don't know. It's not, we're not taking it seriously. Here's the story with what's going on. Historically, if you look at the floodplain maps, and then you get to where the Taneytown is on the map, it's just blank inside, because the city never participated to be mapped years ago. And that was fine, and those were all the sorts of issues you had. And then now the Bay and the FEMA thing and Katrina and all that stuff that happened with flooding, FEMA said, that's great, we're going to redo all our maps and delineate where these 100-year floodplains are. And if you don't want to participate, that's fine. In the program, in the insurance stuff, that's at the end. If you don't want to participate in the mapping program, which is the front, fine, we're going to map it for you, because no longer will we have a blank in the, okay. If you want to participate in the program, you have to have maps that have been approved, and you have to have a floodplain ordinance, those two things. And the floodplain ordinance has to be at least what the state model is. There's a model, which is the federal but state model. You can put bells and whistles on it, but it's got to have some core stuff. And we've done this before with other things, with stormwater management. This isn't a surprise. So that has to be done. And then you have to live, you walk the walk, you talk the talk, you walk the walk now. Means that when people that live in floodplains in your town want to do things like put additions on or put fences up or do things, you can't allow them to do that, because that's what this is about. It's about not building in the floodplains anymore. So your building permit process, our zoning process, has to take that into account and has to tell people that are affected, sorry, it violates our rule. That's it. Once we do all that, we're in the program. There doesn't cost anything. It's just it's not like a program where we're signing up. It's like we're compliant, is in other words. We're doing what we're supposed to.
One further thing. Even if you have floodplain, and even you can still build in that floodplain if you buy insurance. And that insurance depends on what kind of floodplain you're in. They got A, B, and C, D.
Well, that's
How
true.
many Outer Banks was when it was in an A floodplain? I had to spend X number of dollars to buy flood insurance because I was in that floodplain.
Right. Well,
And it was part of doing business.
Well, the insurance part is part of that, but you know how we're dealing with Maryland and the environment and the way things are here, okay? They're taking a little more aggressive approach and saying, the issue of flood insurance is how you're seeing it as the consumer, okay, as the person at the end saying it. You're not in this program, so I can't get flood insurance. That's not what the government is doing this about. They're trying to limit the encroachment in the floodplains, because when you build something in the floodplain, you create a bigger footprint of flooding, right? It creates space, and so the flood goes further away, and they're trying to stop that. So in Maryland, it's pretty restrictive about what you can and can't do if you live in a floodplain. Now, not everybody here lives in a floodplain. Very few people do. But here's the issue of how we got it. The mayor's right. We deal with this all the time, and it always gets to a certain spot. In 2010, when the whiskers first started to grow, we didn't have any maps. Everybody wanted us to join the program, and the maps weren't even done. So it was like, well, what are you asking us to agree to? So the last time that something was done was actually July 31st, 2012. So we're almost to the 2-year mark, right? And in that point in time, there were draft maps that had to come out and had to be reviewed. And the county was doing it, the state was doing it, everybody was going through the process, because I think I gave a report last year saying this needed to be done by October in the past. We're behind, in other words. So the maps went to CDM, our engineer, and said, look at these, tell us, because the purpose was not just to look at the maps, but to see if there's anything wrong, if we want to dispute any of this. They were actually asking for our input. And CDM looked at it and said, hey, there's not really a big problem with the maps, but they're not finalized. And there needs to be a public process to finalize the maps. Okay, I'm not talking about the drawings on the maps, but imagine if you owned a house that on this map is going to say is in a floodplain. You might want to know that we're about to designate your house in a floodplain, and you might maybe want to even complain about it and maybe do a study and maybe do some stuff to show that you are in or you're out. We've never gone through that public process. The county has, other jurisdictions have, but we never have. We just stopped because at that same time period in 2012 was when the ENR project started. And CDM, there was emails that said, this is no longer a priority, this is the priority. So it stopped.
Well, in fact, we're the only municipality that is not in the FEMA floodplain in the county.
And
Mount
Mount
Airy is going into it, but everybody else is already in it. When the maps are approved in May or whenever they're supposed to be approved, Mount Airy will be part of the FEMA floodplain. We'll be the only town that doesn't have it. And again, what that means for the property owner is that if they happen to be in a floodplain, they're not going to be able to sell their home.
So here's what we have to do. Because we talked about this last year and said, are we going to do this? We have to get the maps. We have to have a public process for the maps. And so the recommendation I gave you last year is still the same.
We've got maps. I mean, I remember getting stacks of maps in them.
Yeah, but we have to have at least a working understanding of where we're talking about. So we need to be cognizant of the maps and say, this is where we're issues. And then there needs to be notification to the public in general that we have these maps that we're considering adopting as our floodplain maps in general. And there probably needs to be specific notices to the people who are absolutely impacted. That seems fair. So you find out who these people are on this map and you send them a letter and we have a public hearing about it where CDM is present to explain to these people who are going to have questions what the story is. So that public process happens and you can say, check, we've done the public process. Maps are good to go. Then we have the ordinance, which everybody always thinks is this huge problem. It's really vanilla or chocolate. There's really not much you can choose from here. We have a model from the state, and we have to follow that model. Why would we want to do anything more? We're barely doing what we're supposed to do. So we adopt that model. The only issue that we've ever had, and we have a disagreement here in the staff, is that should the city be the body that reviews these things, or should it be the county? It's really easy to say, let the county do it. But the argument I've always made, because I'm always the anti on this, is that you're going to have a citizen who wants to do something that if he lives in a floodplain has to go to the county and get the county to give you the variance. Not a zoning variance, but a variance from this. Wouldn't you rather have that citizen come into the town and come to our planning commission or something like that, even if CDM has to be involved, so that they can have local control? Isn't that what we like? That's vanilla or chocolate. Decide, and then that's done.
And that's where we ended
Exactly.
a year and a half ago.
And that's where we ended.
We were at that point of discussing it,
Right.
and
Well, again,
couldn't come to
I
a
maintain it really doesn't make any difference because there's not that much of an issue that we're going to be dealing with anyway. I'm probably 1%, and I'm just pulling a number out of the air, 1% of the Taneytown properties may be in a floodplain, less than that probably. And it's really not going to come up. I really just don't think it's going to be a problem.
But it is for those people. I mean, so it's not like I'm saying, wow, this is really going to create a problem for us and it's going to take time. It's you all tell me what you think you want done and it's here. I mean, we've already done it. It's just that we can't agree on some of these things. A lot of the issues that you don't like don't sit well with you. Okay, they don't feel well with you, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I read these things to you in the past. They were about putting with fences. You can't put fences in the floodplain, okay? You can't do certain things like that. There were things where we have to have easements. If you have an easement for the floodplain, remember we had to give like forest conservation easements? Well, if a property comes in and wants to build, and when I'm talking about a developer, I'm talking about a house wants to do something, we've got to say, oh, by the way, we need to have a protective easement over your floodplain now. And those things you said, we don't really like doing. Well, you don't have a choice. If you want to do this, that's part of it. So we can dust all this off. I am not trying to be an obstacle. I'm just trying to tell you it is a very logical process. Just say that you want that to be, the fifth first priority that we have. And it can be done. I mean, it's not that hard. Tell us that, we'll make it happen, but you know what the ramifications are. And if you want to know more about it, we can talk about it.
Jim, you'll be faced with this more than anyone. What's your feel?
We have a handful of properties that are gonna be impacted. As the mayor said, years ago, the floodplain maps stopped at the city boundary. We have since annexed properties that
Yeah.
had been mapped, that had flood hazard areas. There are very few. I don't know that we have any structures in floodplains. But as Jay said, the ordinance that we would have to adopt is very limiting. It does essentially, for all intents, prevent development in the floodplains. Not a lot of properties are affected, but the ones that are, it's a big deal. So, it's not something we're gonna deal with every day or probably every month. It's a small number of properties, but as the mayor said, for those properties, it's an issue. And I've probably had 4 or 5 that have had issues with trying to obtain financing because they were shown as a flood hazard, having a flood hazard area on the property, and that we don't participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. So it does happen. It's not,
So you've actually already experienced this.
oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
What are we gonna tell Mr. Homeowner when he walks in the front door and says, or in the council chambers and says, "You've rendered my property worthless because you haven't participated in the floodplain. I can't sell my property because it's got floodplain on it, and nobody will give anybody a mortgage." What are we gonna tell that guy? I don't know how, I mean, we're not being responsible if we don't enact this.
The problem we had before is, if we adopt the ordinance, we're putting ourselves right in the middle between the two people you're talking about. The guy that wants to sell and the guy that wants to buy. If we're the one that's going to make the decision as to what he can do, then we're now wedged in between those two.
Well, I think we can make a
responsible.
decision within the guidelines outlined by FEMA. I don't think that there's any gray area in this. It's pretty black and white. You know, if you're in this type of floodplain, A, B, C, or D, this is what you got to do in order to build there or occupy it.
Talking about making additions, okay, to existing things within the floodplain.
Well, again, I think it's defined
The right-of-way,
verbatim.
we gotta, do we even have a set of approved plans? Floodplain plans that are not 10 years old?
This is,
We have to decide if we want to do it or the county do it. Okay?
well,
That's the
my
big thing.
opinion is you ought to let the county do it. But
That's, out of everything, that's the one we need, that's your option,
That's what we have to decide.
right?
Do we want
And
to
then
do
if
it
you
or
want to
not?
do this whole thing or not.
Yeah.
If you want to do the whole thing, the only question I have for it is, do you want people to come to our planning commission and deal with this? Or do you want them to go to the county and deal with it?
First of all, it's going to be so rare that when somebody comes before planning and zoning, or us, or whoever, and has a floodplain question, we're going to have to hire an expert to answer the questions anyway. So, my way of thinking is if you let the county handle it, they're going to ones that are going to hire the experts, or they're going to be more familiar with dealing with it, and they'll know the answers anyway.
But last time, we were looking at it just the opposite.
Well,
We didn't
I
want
know
the
that,
county
and I didn't like it then
interfering
either.
with the city business.
I mean, what I should do is, I guess, get the old thing, I know I've sent this to you before, so I'll find it, send it to you again, and we can talk about it in front of you, but the two provisions that you had big problems with were, if a property owner that owns a house that is in this floodplain, so we don't know who it is, but it's on the map, wants to come in and do something, whatever it is he wants to do, he wants to get a permit to do something, we would say, oh, we've checked the map, and your property is in a floodplain. And under our new ordinance, you need to give us an easement, a perpetual easement, from 100 foot from the stream top to there. And you can't do anything in that 100 feet. You can't put sheds in there, can't do fences in there. You can put a 2-strand barbed wire fence, it says, but that's it. And if you don't give us that easement, we're not going to give you the permit to do your bathroom, whatever would come, put him in contact with us, you get that. That's the tough end of this, right? That's the bad part. There's no options around that, and that's really what we're talking about. The whole county versus town thing is when he comes to us, instead of us saying, go to the county and deal with this, there is an appeal process, and that's why I said you can go to the whoever we dictate, which would probably be the planning commission, and you can get a variance. That you might be allowed to do that, and there's conditions about how you do that and things like that. Do you want that appeal to be somebody at the county office building at a staff level, or do you want that appeal to be somebody here? That's the decision to make. The rest is just the bad part of the medicine that you have to swallow if you're going to do it.
Before that happens, that person who comes to us and say, I wanted to build an addition that's going to encroach on this floodplain, is going to go to a lender and say, I need $50,000 to build this addition on my house. And the lender's going to say, you can't do that unless you buy flood insurance because you're in a floodplain.
And when he comes to us, we're going to say,
Or if he
you can't do it at all.
comes to us and he says, according to the maps, you're in a floodplain, we're not going to give you any money because you can't buy insurance.
What, you know, and this is rather, I'm getting a little bit more confused with this. What does the floodplain insurance do?
The floodplain, again, floodplains are in varying degrees. There's
I know, but
there's
I'm not worried about.
severe floodplains and moderate floodplains. And depending on what type of flood, where your encroachment is, the insurance is minimal. That's cheap, actually. Flood insurance is, and that's one of the issues with the whole flood system is that flood insurance is too cheap, but that's not our
Subsidized by the
discussion.
federal government.
And we don't have a dog in that fight.
Is that subsidized by the federal government? Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
that's established by the federal government. Example, I did a mortgage for a person in Emmitsburg. It was right on that Tom's Creek there, right as you go into Emmitsburg. She backed up to that. Because she was a certain distance from that creek, the floodplain came up into her yard, up into her backyard. But because it didn't come within X number of feet of her house, she was okay. She didn't have to have flood insurance.
And what were you doing?
But if she wanted to go out and build an addition on the back of her house that encroached in that floodplain, she would have to have flood insurance.
Well, that's not what I just heard.
But we're talking apples and oranges.
Yeah.
He's talking about flood insurance with a lender. I'm telling you about the government saying, you can't build, you can't do that, lady who wants the money. You cannot build into the floodplain. Sorry, even if you could get the money, we're not letting you do that unless you get a variance. And the variance you have to get has to prove that what you're going to build is not going to increase the floodwater surface height and all sorts of other technical things, in which case you could do it if you can prove that. But if you can't prove that, then no, we will not let you build there. End. I mean, that's the draconian part we never liked. That's what it is. I'm not saying we don't need to do this. I'm just saying is that maybe, I mean, I always like to try to move this forward. Maybe we should get the list of affected properties. Are we talking about 10 properties that are affected by this? If we are, we contact them, we find out what the situation is. Maybe they're not even going to be dealing with that. Are you talking about 150 properties? It's kind of a cause and effect. If 10 people have to have their rights taken away, which is what's happening here, so that everyone in town is ineligible to get insurance, well, that's what the state of Maryland is kind of dictating here. This is not optional, as the mayor keeps pointing out. We were told we have to do this, we just haven't done it. So,
But there seems to be two pieces to it. One is this insurance, and the other one,
Well, insurance is a result of finding out whether you're in a floodplain or not. You don't need flood insurance if you're not in a floodplain. If they determine you're in a floodplain, you're going to need insurance. And your structure that you want to construct there has to meet certain qualifications. It might have to be on pilings that are 8 feet tall. It may have to have a French drain around the outside. It may have to have some other definitive improvement to mitigate the flood impact. But that depends on what floodplain you're in.
But I guess I'm hearing you and you're selling stuff, and I'm hearing him and he's legislating stuff, you know? And what I mean by that is, what I heard from Jay is that once you initiate this thing or enact this thing, then what happens is somebody comes in and, like you said, they're gonna, you know, I want to build an addition to the house. Okay, you go to some lender, and the lender's gonna say, hey, you're encroaching on the floodplain on that. But that's also gonna trigger a permit from our department that then would have to say, you can't do that.
Right. Or you have to put it up on pilings. Or
Right.
you have to do something so it mitigates the,
mitigate it.
but you have to get a variance to do that. And the
Right.
whole issue I'm saying is, who do you want to go?
Then that's
Who do
where
you
the
want to do
variance
that?
piece kicks in, is after you've gone to borrow your money, and then lender says, hey, you're in the floodplain, or you're encroaching the floodplain, and then they're gonna say, then they're gonna come here, they're gonna go to Jim, or somebody, you know, and they're gonna say, this is what I wanna do. And even if, then it's like, well, no, you can't do that, sorry. Then the next thing is, okay, if they still wanna pursue it, then their recourse is to go to some board.
Right, our board, their
Our
board,
board.
somebody.
Somebody who's going to do a hearing.
Let me ask a
Now,
question.
the question, as I understand it, is, where do you want to go? You want to go to the county? You want to go to the city? I mean, like you said, it's chocolate or vanilla when it gets to that one, you know?
I don't mean to go against Jay, and I don't mean this as a disparagement against you, Jim, but do we have someone in town that has the ability to determine, well, you gotta make this thing 6 foot high or 8 foot high or 10
Your
feet?
engineer.
The engineer.
And
Now,
that's,
so then we go to CDM.
that's the cost.
In essence-
And
in
while
essence.
that seems like, oh, wow, we're spending money on that, we do that all the time in any development we deal with. CDM basically
Yeah.
determines where the floodplain line is, and once the floodplain line is determined, it's pretty simple from there. So it's not a huge thing. And again, I can put everything before you to get this thing moving ahead. I mean, we can schedule the maps. If you guys say, let's go through the mapping process, we can get that done. I can get you the ordinance again. Remember, this ordinance has to be approved by the state, so what we want might not be what we get.
Yeah.
But the only thing I really need in the end is, what do you want to do with the appeals? So,
I think I kind of.
you know, maybe we don't have to worry about the end until we get to the end. Maybe we start at the beginning. But you just need to tell us that that's, like I joked about, it's another priority.
Yeah, what
If you
priority
want
number
that
is it?
done, then we'll tell CDM, get the map stuff
I
ready.
think we're at 6.
Would it be possible,
One of six?
The mapping is already done though, right?
It's the maps are created, they just need to be digested from pictures to who are these people? What are their addresses? How do you contact them?
But I mean, the maps are completed and approved by FEMA.
I don't think they're approved by
I
FEMA
think
yet.
the approval is this spring, the final approval.
Right,
But the ones we'll be looking at are gonna be the ones that they're gonna approve.
Right.
So basically, they're approved, it's just not
yeah.
formalized.
Right, we're not gonna be able to change them.
Right.
No matter what you wanted, it is.
No, I'm
what it
not
is.
talking
No,
about
I'm just
changing
saying,
them,
but
I'm
right.
just talking about the
They will
formal
be the final
process.
maps. A year or 2 years ago, we could have input on it, but now those are the maps that are gonna be used, yeah.
If I could, I'd like to ask Jay about you mentioned earlier about a public notification in general, but then specific notices for specific people. Could you
Right.
elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, since we're going to do this and it's a legislative act, we need to, and we normally don't advertise what our law doesn't require us to do that, but we probably need to advertise that the city is going to adopt the FEMA floodplain maps of yada yada pursuant to this, so that there's a notice in the paper if people are interested, because if I'm a citizen, I don't know that you're looking out for me. I might see this notice and say, hey, I want a copy of that map. Where can I look at it? Okay, that's what that notice is for. But we are a small town, we should go the extra step and point out to the people that are going to have this on their issue, hey, you specifically should know about this. Here is a copy, or here what you need to do. I mean, we can lead the horse to water, we can't make him drink. We should at least lead him to water. And so that's what I'm saying about the private notifications. Wouldn't it be nice to tell these people, hey, look about what's about to happen? Unfortunately, all they're going to do is get educated on what's going to happen, because there's not much we can do if we do the program. It's black or white. But that's what I meant by this.
Thank you.
Whether we adopt the floodplain or not doesn't change the fact that they're in a floodplain or not. And again, that's, the lender doesn't care whether we do or we don't. But if we find that there's a property that's in a floodplain, and the condition for giving that person a loan to buy that property or to build on that property is that they buy flood insurance, they can't do it, because we don't participate.
I'm going to send the lender a thank you note.
That's really not my understanding either. They're not prohibited from buying an insurance.
If they pay
policy,
cash for it,
right?
right, no, I mean, they could,
The only
you know, they
thing
could,
is they can't buy the cheap insurance that's subsidized from the federal government.
they won't have a lender that will lend them the money. If they have their own funds, they can buy it.
Well,
I mean, that would be, I mean, they can do it if they want to.
That's my point. My point is that, that's not prohibited them from going to any insurance company and buying flood insurance, right?
No, I mean, again, anybody can do anything they want to. This is America. They can buy anything they care to. But
So that's
in order for someone to finance it, to provide them a Fannie Mae or a Freddie Mac loan, and they're in a floodplain, they're gonna have to have flood insurance.
exactly. And you can get that insurance from
Right.
any insurance company. Am I wrong?
No, you can't get that, you can't. It's gotta come from the federal FEMA flood insurance fund. There's flood insurance is from
Only sold
FEMA.
by the government.
Yep, yep.
Okay.
And that's why, and the government owns it and subsidizes it in order to keep the premiums low. And the issue has been over all the years is these people build in floodplains and their houses get wiped
It's not the
out.
government, it's we that are subsidizing it.
The people build in floodplains get their houses get wiped out and then they go back and build in them again.
Well, then, let's get the maps, do what we have to do with them, prepare an ordinance, and get moving.
Priority 6, 7, wherever we are.
Yeah, I mean, what's the goal?
I'm at your
time?
service, whatever you want.
What's the time frame?
Hmm?
What's the time frame?
I think we need to do it ASAP. We need to be ready to go when these FEMA floodplain maps are
Can
ready.
we do it by then?
May?
We need to get in touch with FEMA and say, what do we need to get caught up?
We're all on
We
that.
already have
I
six
mean,
prior
and
number
States
ones.
is the one dealing with it. I mean, it's not like we don't know, it's just that we said that this isn't what we're gonna deal with anymore. So if you say deal with it, we'll swing the turret that way and we'll deal with it. It can be, we have a meeting set up on Tuesday already in anticipation of what was gonna happen. So Tuesday next week, meeting with the engineers to get the maps out. So next month should be no problem in at least telling you, here are the maps. That's not going to be advertising to the public, because I don't think it's fair to you all not to know what we're talking about before we tell everybody else. So next month, we'll bring you the maps. I'll send you the draft ordinance so that you can look at it. It is not to be introduced because you may want to change it. That's next month. We can make that happen. That's good for you.
February 8th at the site?
We can do it at the February, the retreat.
Off-site.
Oh.
Yeah, that would make,
Borrow his hearing aids.
Right. Let's say we get it all to you, beginning of the beginning of February, you can talk about it at your public meeting, and then at the retreat, if you want, we can talk about it some more. You'll have everything, won't be anything new at that point in time.
good.
Okay?
All right.
All right, well, let's move on. We've talked enough
Please.
about those two things. Let's go into new business. Monthly financial report. Anybody have any questions on the monthly financial report?
I don't have any questions, but I do appreciate the graphs.
They're better. I'm glad you're back.
Yeah.
All right, accounts payable. Anybody have any questions on accounts payable?
Sounds good for me.
Next, we have the CDM schedule for hourly rate charges for 2014. Any comments, Henry, for us on that?
Even beyond the rates, is it time to start looking?
That's why I put it.
Complacency setting in, things have been dragging out. They've had the maps for God knows how long, well 17,
Yeah, well, 17.
ENR.
Well,
I mean, you know,
here's what I'll say. There's been drastic change within their organization in the past
since they were sold out,
6 months,
yeah, since they changed
since
ownership.
they went to Smith.
Right.
I have no problem. I don't think we don't have the same relationship we had before.
No, I've noticed that completely, yeah,
We're more the number than we are a client.
right.
So with that, the way to do that is we'll get some solicitation, we'll go out and look at engineering firms. And, you know, we're not gonna bid it in a formal contract. We're gonna go out and we're gonna bring in some, qualified firms
Get their rates.
and get their rates. We'll get them on that priority.
7.
Is it normal to do that outside of an RFP?
Yeah, professional services, yes.
How much did their rates go up this year?
They didn't.
Oh, they didn't?
They stayed the same.
Their rates look good. I'm not
It's not the
complaining about
rate.
the
The
rates.
rates
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
that's the other,
The
yeah.
performance.
They just
The
don't seem
rates
to be
haven't changed
responding like they used to.
from 2013. The same rates as they were last year.
A lot of places that, and you may want to consider this, I'll give you the benefit of what other places do, is you have a city engineer that is the engineer that we use all the time to do the things like the floodplain stuff and things like that. And they do sometimes the development review, which I don't think you're going to get somebody better to do than what we have, because they have the continuity of, reviewing all the developments and how that all fits together. What a lot of places do is they say, well, you're the city engineer for that, you're the go-to guy, but you're not necessarily the engineer for the designs and the builds of the capital projects. And that's where we have always done it. It's just like well 17. CDM, go ahead and design it. CDM, go ahead and do the construction management. And those are big ticket items, and they're very focused items for us, that a lot of towns say, we're gonna have a city engineer just like you have a city attorney. That's our go-to guy for these things. And when we have a big project, like we wanna build the water tanks or something like that, we're gonna say, we'll allow you to bid just like everybody else on that, or we're gonna have a special person to come in. So, I mean, you might wanna think about saying, we're gonna look for a new city engineer, or we might look for new plan review people. I have one town that does all three. They have one engineer that just does plan review. They have one engineer that does water and sewer for the town, and then any other project is not guaranteed towards them. They have to bid it out.
But do they then manage that contract?
Well,
'Cause
this
I
one
think
town,
that's lacking too.
right, this one town did not do that. They got a different person to manage it, and that was a disaster, and it still is. That's the one where it was the design, it wasn't me, it was that. And that some of the points where we've never had a problem in having quality stuff. Our stuff is always designed and built the right way. It might be the ENR plant's an example. We really would like them to do the inspection because they did the design, and so if there's any problems, they kind of have to fix it. But we may not be able to afford that. So that's something that we should deal with down the road, of whether they get construction management and design services at the same time. But you may very carefully think of whether you would throw them out of I'm not saying you're throwing them out, but change horses on the development review stuff that deals with the developers, because they have a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge about how these developments are.
But do they still have it?
Well, we haven't had many developments either, so I don't know. I guess
But I
that's,
mean,
With the turnover.
right.
with the change in ownership, where have they moved?
If you lose Brian, right, that's the only person that has
That's
any
still left over.
left. If Brian was not here, we wouldn't be dealing with anybody that's the same, right?
Yeah. That's the last straw. One of the things I could, from my experience in this, is and I know it was prohibited. If you had the design piece, you could not bid anything else. If you did design, you couldn't do the construction. So you can give somebody the design, but then you bid.
Yeah.
And we do that, okay? But we also have the other piece of the construction management.
And that's easy, because we don't have any money for any new projects, so
That's-
we're not
yeah.
gonna ever have to do that.
As a matter of fact, they get, typically, this is the month MDE requests submittals for projects.
Yeah.
They didn't bother. We got no money.
Yeah.
And I resubmitted stuff from last year over again with the hope that maybe maybe we might get another break. But that didn't happen. I even put in belt filter press last year to see, and they say that they do not fund or grant any equipment. But, $1 million is a big piece.
Now, I think their rates are reasonable. I was just wondering about the company itself.
Well, the question I have is, you would assign, you have to make a decision by, Monday, whether we go forward with this signing that. That's why, I didn't sign it. I wanted to see what your thoughts were on that.
Is there a contract we sign yearly with them?
No, there's no no.
Except for projects.
So if we decided to change engineers in 6 months, we could do that without any obligation?
Right.
Right.
The only thing you're doing is, it's like a time and materials type thing with them. And that's what they're giving you. Their rates. If you use them this year, that's what they're going to charge you.
I don't have any
Okay.
problem with that.
Yeah, that's good.
And I guess you can sign.
Getting late, folks. We need to move on. Next is the short-term disability policy.
Okay. Well,
Me.
all right, Andrew, I'm glad you jumped on that one.
Okay, a long time back, the city paid 100% of medical insurance for all employees and 100% of long-term and short-term disability insurance. They came to the point where we opted to put some of the cost of the insurance onto the employees, and for the health insurance, medical. And looking at the long and short-term disability, the city decided we were putting out more money in the insurance program than we were even coming close to collecting. So we decided to self-insure at that point. And over the years, we have funded people at their full salary and benefits for the period of time that they've been disabled. It's been on a case-by-case basis, and looking at the new employee manual, we feel it's time to document it the way it should be done. And what we're looking at is a policy that states that the city will compensate employees for up to 1 year of short-term disability. Employees are required to exhaust all sick, annual, and personal leave prior to the city compensating the employee. The city will then compensate that employee for the remainder of the year that started when the disability started. We will cover salary and benefits for that period of time. We will not cover an illness. It has to be a disability. If somebody has a heart attack, that's an illness, that's not a disability.
Now, this participatory with the employee, or is this, you thinking the city's gonna pay for all of that?
No, city pays for it the same way we've done for years. It's just that it has never really been defined. We'll put limitations on them, such that if you receive 2 or more,
Have we looked at different short-term disability plans? I mean, 1 year seems like a long time based on the short-term disability plans that I'm familiar
well,
with.
that's the max. They're going to have to maintain contact with, the medical profession and us. All right?
Plans that
It's
I've
not-
been familiar with had like a 6-week short-term disability, then you go into long-term disability. And then the long-term disability would pay like 60% of the benefit.
But
I'm
we're
just wondering,
requiring-
I mean, I'm not insurance
We're
man.
requiring them to use all their leave before the disability kicks in. Okay? We're not,
I mean,
and this
I
is-
guess we've talked to insurance people about this. I know that, oh, shoot, when he's Scott, what's the name of Kelly, Winford Kelly is our medical insurance carrier. We run this by them for their opinion or suggestions or thoughts or anything like that?
No, we're just looking at the fact that that has been a benefit, and we don't want to cut benefits at this point in time. We've done it, I don't know,
We know how
5
much
times
this is
maybe
gonna
over the
cost.
last 10 years. We've done it maybe 5 times over the last 10 years, something like that.
Or do we have any idea what a policy like this is going to cost?
Not this time, no. But we knew it, years ago, it was more expensive than we were even coming
Well,
close.
I would agree that we need some kind of defined policy for short-term disability, but I think we need to educate ourselves on what's out there and what kind of rates are charged, so we get a concept of what the real cost is.
I think that, again, I feel like the historian. Many years ago, we looked into this, and we compared the cost of actually buying, and I think at one point in time, we were paying for those policies. Okay, and what we would determined was that the premiums that we would pay would cost more in the long term than what we would put out. So we were
I'm
self-insured.
not surprised.
So we did self-insurance in that case. That's what we've been doing. And so, when you compare the rates over time, what we would have paid versus the incidents that we've had, then we're ahead.
Yeah,
It
you say you've
hasn't-
done 5 in the last 10 years.
It hasn't cost the city
Right.
much money at all.
Your premiums would have been way,
To cover 40 people or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but again, I go back to what I said earlier, is that we can't offer 1975 benefits in 2014. And if whatever that means, but I don't know we know what it means. There's a lot of different approaches to benefits as compared to what it was back when we made that policy. Is that the right policy? Or should we subscribe to something that is more of the norm, more of the industry average, more of the, like municipalities do. I'm not arguing with it, I'm just saying, I think we need to, if we're looking at it, we'll look at it and make sure we're right before we institute a policy that we wish we hadn't instituted, that's all.
Well, the only thing we're doing is asking for direction. That's what we're asking for.
I don't know.
We don't, personally, I don't see when the time comes that you started with a benefit that paid 100% of their insurance for lying in short term, and then you cut that to say, well, we'll cover short-term disability to a certain point. And to keep cutting it further means you're doing away with it. So for an insurance that you had been covering 100%, you want to cut it out. To me, that is going a little bit too far. We're not a big company. We are a small-knit group of people that
Benefits are a whole
work.
different specialized area, and I think that we probably sometime in the future, tonight's not the time to talk about it, we need to get a benefit expert in here to look at our benefit package and see whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, and then recommend something that's more beneficial to us and to the employees. You know, to simply say, well, we used to pay 100% of the medical benefits. Well, I mean, the only thing I can say is so. I mean, so did everybody else, but nobody does it anymore. And it's just evolution. It's just the way the marketplace has evolved. And I just think we need to make sure that we're fair to our employees as well as to our taxpayers.
Well,
Before we-
Bobby here, and she just recently met with all that, so maybe she could shed some information and light on some of the stuff.
Well,
Into what direction are you looking for?
Didn't you just meet with the insurance?
Oh, you're talking about Colonial Life?
Yeah.
Well, whoever our insurance carrier is that, you had that mandatory meeting about.
Colonial Life Insurance is offering to, there's supposed to be open enrollment every year, and the city of Taneytown hasn't done it, for the Colonial Life Insurance.
Oh, that was just life insurance?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The medical, so our medical coverage is provided to all the employees. Colonial Life is employee participation at their will, where they pay 100%.
Oh, okay.
Where they have additional life insurance, short-term disability, et cetera.
all right, well.
I misunderstand.
No,
I thought it was all the other benefits. That was just life insurance.
I agree with 100% of defining the short-term benefit policy. That's all. I agree with that.
I'm sorry?
I agree 100% that we need to define the short-term benefit policy. Whatever that may be.
It'll go in the book this way.
I was
and
going to say, it'll be part of the book
It'll be part
that
of the
we
book, and
get.
then you can comment on it when it comes out.
Okay. And if it
Any
takes
other new
you-
business?
If it takes you guys as long to read it and digest as it has taken me to get it together, I don't have to worry about it for a long time.
You're going to have to redo it over by the time we get done.
Like the normal 10-year plan.
That's sort of like painting a,
Any other new business?
bridge. Once you get finished, you start over. What did you do now?
Would it be appropriate to hold council comments until Monday night? Everybody agree with that? Or somebody have to say something tonight? Yes, I'll call on the audience to answer any question, or to ask any questions they may.
Can we come up and add and talk to you guys?
Yes, it's your turn to do that.
Hang on.
It's all being recorded and mic'd.
We don't know if we're in the right place or not, but as everybody knows in the area, there's a major problem with safety accidents at Mayberry and 140. We don't know who we need to try to talk to try to address that issue. Is it Taneytown? Is it Westminster? Can you guys point us in the right direction of where we should? I mean, there was 3 accidents there within 24-hour period. My daughter was one of the ones Friday night. So she was involved in one about 12 years ago, and she's still suffering from it, so.
Well, that's a terrible, terrible intersection, and I was just thinking back past this last accident, I was thinking back all the folks that I've known that have been
Right, it's just not, I
injured.
mean, it's not 1 or 2, I mean, you know.
It's been a problem for
Well,
years
it's
and
about
years
coming
and
around,
years.
Probably, if we went back through over the years.
Route 140 is a state highway, and it's
Right.
governed by the State Highway Administration.
Right,
So I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that would probably be the place to start.
SHA.
That's District 7, definitely.
Can we give them some names?
that's basically what we were trying to, because, I mean, if you were to just pick up the phone and try to call somebody from the state, it's like, you know, chasing your tail kind of thing.
Dave
So we didn't-
Coyne,
Yeah, Dave,
The headquarters is in Frederick for this area, and we'll give you the contact person who's in charge of that office,
Right.
that district.
Okay.
Sir,
Apparently, the state did a traffic study there within the last year or so. They did it during the summer, which is the wrong time to do a traffic study at that intersection. You need to do it during schools in session. Our biggest concern is Runnymede Elementary School. That's one of our children. My third child of 3 children got 1 more year left there, and I'm sure nothing's gonna be done at that intersection by the time he gets out of there. But I'm looking for the future of the other children, and I'll a survey for CLSI, and I know Creekside's got quite a few more houses gotta go in, yes, there's gonna be even more school traffic heading in and out of that intersection. I know it's not you guys, I think it's Westminster.
No, but I think living in the area and the majority of our citizens drive up and down that road every day,
Right, it's a concern for everybody.
we
It's
would
just a
certainly
matter of-
offer any kind of,
Response to it all,
any kind of support we could, we can't give any official support, we
Right,
can't
right.
do anything about it
That's
directly.
what we're really looking to see if you
But
guys.
if we
can
need
sort
to
of
write
push
a
in
letter
that
saying,
direction.
we need to do something about that intersection, I think we could probably do that.
Right.
and sir, you said your daughter was in an accident Friday night?
My daughter and my grandsons were in the one that was there Friday night.
How are they doing?
Actually, my grandsons were unharmed, but my daughter, she's in shock trauma. She's been down there since Friday, so.
2 broken arms.
Right, 2 broken arms. She was 37 weeks pregnant, so they wound up having to take the baby and stuff. But it's just, most of them are all rear-ended. I mean, she got rear-ended, pushed into oncoming traffic. And again, I mean, I know it's, like I said, we're not saying really Taneytown has the issue, but we're just trying to figure out where we can go, try to see if something can be done about it.
It seems like nobody slows down, they're not paying attention.
Because they know
Left-hand
it's only a
turn-
yellow
wait,
light
wait a
and
minute,
not.
Wait a minute. Left-hand turn has nowhere to go but stay right dead in the traffic. It should be the opposite way, they should have their own lane. Or put some kind of ridges down to at least get their attention while they're coming up to an intersection. Because this is not gonna stop, it's only gonna get worse. Who needs to get killed? You know, sooner or later, somebody's really gonna get killed, you know? So, I mean, she wound up in a coma for a month in shock trauma, and they didn't even expect her to walk. So, I mean, we're thankful for what we have, but how many families and kids have to go through that? You know, without trying to do something with the intersection to make it safer.
what I could do is, you have somebody have a pen and paper there. I can give you, I don't have his telephone number.
No, but somebody does.
I got a pen, you got this paper?
Yeah, we don't have any say on the lights in town.
Right, I understand, but like, basically, what we're
We
trying.
were hoping you guys could point us in the right direction. Now, I know
Where we
Joe,
should go.
or you posted on Facebook, and that's how I.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming in to talk to us tonight, really. You know, and any help that we can give you, we will, so.
Yeah, I think Joe would make the ideal point person on that one.
If you, I'd be happy, yeah, be happy to act as liaison, as a matter of fact.
It's dcoyne@sha.state.md.us.
That's my personal cell phone number, we know
Okay, thanks.
His first name is Dave.
Yeah, Dave, but that's his email address.
Dave Coyne.
District 7, he's district engineer, his title is district engineer. In other words, he's in charge of all of District 7, which includes that area as well.
Well, that's why we figured we came here, it'd probably be easier to try to start making phone calls through the state and, this amount of time, this one, really get anywhere, so.
You have his phone number, Henry?
No, I don't. I don't have that. But you certainly, a way of doing that too would be if you look up State Highway, SHA, they have a website, look for District 7. District 7 would have a phone number, and you can just ask for him there too.
I know we can get a huge enough petition together for concerned people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, after my daughter's accident, there was 2 other ones within 2 weeks of hers that also had head trauma. And the one lady was talking to her husband on the phone and just blacked out. I mean, can you imagine, well, any of you can't even imagine what that's like, going to the hospital every day and not knowing what's gonna happen. So, I mean, and I know it's none of y'all's, have anything to do with it, but we're just trying to get as many people on board with this as we can, because it's only getting worse with, more people moving in and more houses, developments, and there's a school there, a lot of kids, and, I mean,
I just want to do something so.
It's a wonder there hadn't been a school bus accident there.
What's that?
Wonder there hasn't been a bad school bus accident there.
It's only a matter of
well, they had a meeting right after that light was put up at the middle school, and I asked, I guess I shouldn't have, but I asked why didn't they put a red light up to work when the school was letting out, so the school buses could at least get in and out safely, or supposedly.
Yeah, they could turn that light to
And I
red.
was blowed off. They just didn't even answer the question. Well, thank God we got what we got and move on. I didn't, so I don't know. I mean, maybe we're lucky we just got that light up, but there's nothing there, bridges or anything on the road like you do when you come up to the circle or any other intersection or the grooves on the side of the road. If you bear off, it's there for safety, and maybe that's what we need to do, but we just need to know where we got to go with it. So.
And the only way you're gonna do it is if,
Circle there would be a good
That's
solution.
you gotta stay on
Doing
it.
the surveying work I do, I think circle would be perfect there.
But,
I had somebody say, oh, well, you're gonna be coming up there 55 mile an hour, you don't wanna come up and jam on your brakes to head in a circle.
Well, that's the
Why
point.
they put warning lights up before the circle that are flashing saying, circle ahead, that you need to slow up. And they're the safest, I mean, worst you're gonna get out of them is a fender bender.
They've got a circle on a 55-mile-an-hour road and on 15 going into Point of Rocks.
Yep.
yeah, we got one.
Works fine.
Road down there, they turned that into a circle, so
Yeah,
maybe that's.
ever since they put that one up here in town, I've been here since, before they put that one in. There used to be wrecks there at that flashing like crazy. Now, I don't hardly ever hear of an accident there now. People are like, oh, most people don't know how to use it. What is it not how to use? Yield to the traffic coming into the circle.
Well, they don't.
And like I said, the worst you're gonna get out of it is somebody's gonna hit you and it's gonna be a fender.
That's right, you'll be going 20 miles an hour instead of 60 mile an hour.
Yep, and it'll slow you up when that 140, what's it gonna take, you leave for work maybe 2 minutes earlier, if that, but you're gonna have to get through that circle to slow you up that much. And somebody made a comment about, well, if you're gonna do that, you wanna put one at Tyrone Road. No, Tyrone Road is not near as busy an intersection as Mayberry is during the school season.
Yeah, I'd like to see the statistics of the accidents and deaths that occurred there over the last 20 years. I bet it'd shock you. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. I wish we could do more to help you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Appreciate it. Don't hesitate to contact me. Have a good night, guys. I'll pray for your family. Absolutely. Have a good night.
Anyone else?
Ask Jay, elaborate on what I asked before. That's really on the corner.
Okay?
There never was a park, and therefore you can't say it's very large. So, if you put a parking there, you have to go to your parking regulations again, and you made a comment that the parking lot would be sufficient for that. But the parking lot's on a separate deed, because there's a house between the two. So if you would allow it, and then the guy would turn around and sell that parking lot, now he has these apartments with no parking.
Right. I don't know the answer.
I'm just.
Right. I mean, all I'm saying is, here's the problem. We have a second floor of an old building that's not usable. Okay? How do you get the second floor of buildings in town to be usable? And there's going to be a million issues of parking and fire and access and all those things, but how do we do that? Right now, they're not usable because we have a zoning requirement that doesn't allow it. If we would change that zoning requirement to say, yeah, we'll allow it, what are the other problems? And that's just one, right? We got to figure out the parking. We'd have to figure out, you know, is that something we want to do? But the issue that we seem to have isn't the figuring it out, it's the, do we want to do it at all?
Yeah. We can tie the two up together, though, in case it's a sale.
Well, you could, I mean, because you could put it, I mean, it could be worked out if the property owner is agreeable. And right now, we have a situation where the property owner's not agreeable to do anything really, you know, for us. But maybe he's not gonna be the property owner. Maybe he would sell the building to a property owner that's already improved stuff in town, and they would be able to work with us. But why would anybody else want a building that you can't do anything with the second floor on? You know, and so those are the issues that we're grappling with, and if everybody here says, this is not even something we want to consider, then we don't have to figure it out.
But maybe you can grandfather it, because I think it was, we used to be illegal in the park.
We always said if we just let him do the illegal stuff, maybe fix the front of the building, right? That's not quite our job.
Upstairs is haunted, by the way, so you,
Is that the grandfather there? It's done then, okay?
That's granddad right there.
nobody's gonna live
There's
up there
lots of
anyway.
questions that we'd have to figure
All
out.
right, is there anything else to come before the council tonight? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? A second, all in favor, say aye.
Spoke again.
See you Monday.
Yeah.